How could you? Millionaire storms into his ex-wife's home, but seeing her feeding newborn twins left him in tears. You're going to wake them. Those were the first words Bryn Sullivan spoke when her ex-husband broke down her door like a man possessed. Not a scream, not a plea, just 5 quiet words that carried the weight of 18 months of survival. Close the door, Reed. He stood frozen in the doorway, chest heaving with rage he'd been nursing for over a year, an envelope of evidence clutched in his hand, ready to destroy the woman who he thought had betrayed him. But the words died in his throat, because there she sat in a battered rocking chair that looked like it had been pulled from someone's trash, cradling 2 tiny babies at her breast, and those babies had his eyes. His eyes, the same amber-flecked green that stared back at him from the mirror every morning. The same eyes that had looked out from 4 generations of Hawthorne family portraits. But these eyes were brand new, barely months old, set in 2 perfect faces he'd never seen before. How long were you planning to hide them from me? The question came out strangled, nothing like the accusation he'd rehearsed during the drive over. Hazel just latched. Willow's still eating. You want to have this conversation. You wait until they're finished. I asked you a question, Bryn, and I told you to wait. She didn't even look at him when she said it, just kept her gaze on the babies, adjusting the one on her right breast with the kind of practiced efficiency that spoke of countless nights alone. Her voice was flat, empty, the voice of someone who'd been hollowed out by circumstances and learned to function in the emptiness. But have you ever trusted the wrong person? Have you ever believed a lie so completely that you destroyed everything good in your life? Have you ever realized too late that the person you thought was protecting you was actually the one wielding the knife? If you have, then you understand Reed Hawthorne in this moment, standing in a doorway he just shattered, staring at 2 daughters he never knew existed, beginning to comprehend that everything he believed for the past 18 months was a carefully constructed lie. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone who promised to love you, if you've ever survived something that should have broken you, if you've ever had to choose between bitterness and survival, then you understand Bryn Sullivan, sitting in her broken apartment, feeding babies alone, looking at the man who abandoned her with eyes that held no hope, no anger, just exhaustion so deep it had become part of her bones. Before we go any further into this story, I need something from you. If you believe people can change, if you believe broken trust can ever be rebuilt, hit that like button right now, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, or just say, I'm with you, Dr. Phillips, because what you're about to hear will test everything you believe about love, betrayal, and redemption. And if you're ready for a story that will break your heart and put it back together again, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is what we do here at Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips. We tell stories that don't just entertain, they transform. Now, let me take you back to the beginning of the end, or maybe it's the end of the beginning. With Reed and Bryn, it's hard to tell where one stops and the other starts. The door frame splintered where Reed's shoulder connected with it. Fragments of cheap wood scattered across threadbare carpet that had seen better decades. The sound was violent, explosive, the kind of noise that made neighbors peer through peepholes and debate whether to call the police. But Bryn didn't flinch. She'd survived worse than angry men and broken doors. She'd survived childbirth alone. She'd survived hemorrhaging on an operating table with no one to call, no one to hold her hand, no one to tell her she'd be okay. She'd survived homelessness with newborn twins. She'd survived every single thing that was supposed to break her. So no, she didn't flinch when Reed Hawthorne, tech millionaire, and the man who'd once promised to love her forever, came through her door like vengeance itself. She just looked up from her babies and told him to close the door. Reed's brain couldn't process what his eyes were showing him. He'd come here armed with hospital records, birth certificates, blood type documentation, a DNA test showing 99.9% probability of paternity. He'd come here ready for a fight, ready to confront Bryn about hiding his children, ready to demand answers. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The twins were impossibly small, fragile in a way that made his chest tight. The one on Bryn's left, he somehow knew this was Hazel, watched him with suspicious awareness unusual for a baby. The one on her right, Ruby, was focused entirely on eating, her tiny hand curled against Bryn's breast. And they both had the Hawthorne birthmark. Reed's hand went to his own neck, to the crescent-shaped mark just below his left ear. Every Hawthorne had it. His father had it. His grandfather had it. It was genetic, undeniable, a signature written in skin that proved bloodline better than any test. Both babies had it. How long, Bryn? His voice cracked on her name. How long were you planning to keep them from me? Bryn shifted slightly, adjusting Ruby's position with the kind of gentle competence that came from months of solo parenting. She still didn't look at him. You came here to rage at me, she said quietly. Fine, rage. But these babies haven't eaten since this morning because I had to choose between formula and keeping the heat on. I chose heat because it's November and this building's insulation is garbage. So you're going to stand there and you're going to wait, and when they're fed, you can say whatever you came to say. The apartment was a single room, maybe 400 square feet, trying to serve as bedroom, living room, nursery, and kitchen all at once. Reed's eyes cataloged details he didn't want to see. A kitchenette in the corner with a hot plate on a counter that looked like it might collapse. 2 cribs made from mismatched pieces, clearly donated, probably from a church or shelter. Blankets he recognized as the kind given away to homeless populations. A small space heater that was doing absolutely nothing against the November cold, seeping through single-pane windows. This is how you're living? The words came out before he could stop them. I'm living. Bryn's voice was still that terrible flat monotone. Which is more than you wanted from me 18 months ago. The reference to their divorce hit Reed like a physical blow. His knees went weak. He caught himself against the wall, his hand leaving a smudge on paint that was cracked and peeling. That's not, he started, then stopped. Because what could he say? That's not fair? Nothing about this was fair. That's not true. But it was true, wasn't it? When he'd signed those divorce papers, when he'd believed Constance Merrick's lies about Bryn having an affair, when he'd cut her off from everything without even letting her explain, he'd wanted her gone, wanted her out of his life, wanted to never see her face again because it hurt too much to look at someone he thought had betrayed him. He just hadn't known she was pregnant, hadn't known that his desire to never see her again meant she'd give birth alone, hadn't known that his rage would leave 2 babies growing up in poverty. I have documentation, Reed said, his voice hoarse. He held up the envelope, then realized how stupid it was. What did documentation matter here? Everything from the hospital, medical records. I saw how you nearly died giving birth because no hospital would take you without payment up front. Congratulations. You can read. Why didn't you tell me? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, Seattle traffic hummed. Someone in another apartment was playing music too loud. Normal life continuing, while Reed's understanding of reality crumbled. Bryn finally looked at him, really looked at him, and what Reed saw in her eyes made him wish she'd kept looking away. I tried. 2 words. That's all she said, but the weight of them crushed something in Reed's chest. That's not, he started again. I tried, Bryn repeated, and this time her voice had an edge. Not anger. Something worse. The sound of someone stating facts they'd had to accept. I showed up at your building until security threatened to arrest me. I sent letters, emails. I called from every phone I could find. I stood in the rain outside that charity gala for Hawthorne Technologies, and I was escorted away by men in suits who told me if I came back, they'd file stalking charges. That's impossible. Reed shook his head. I never received anything. Not 1 call. Not 1 letter. Of course you didn't. Bryn's laugh was bitter. Constance made sure of it. The name hit Reed like ice water. Constance Merrick, his mentor, the woman who'd helped him build Hawthorne Technologies from a dorm room idea into a multi-million-dollar data security company. The woman who'd been like family after his parents died. The woman who'd presented him with evidence of Bryn's affair, who'd held him while he cried, who'd assured him he was doing the right thing by divorcing her. Constance wouldn't, Reed started, then stopped. Because Constance would. The realization settled over him with sickening certainty. He thought of the documents he'd found in her office safe just yesterday, the ones that had sent him here in the first place. Fabricated emails, photoshopped images, witness statements from people on Constance's private payroll, an entire infrastructure built to destroy his marriage. She told me to my face, Bryn continued. Her voice remained steady, but tears were sliding down her cheeks now, silent and unchecked. The last time I tried to reach you, 3 months pregnant, and already starting to show, I waited outside your building for 6 hours. When I finally saw you leaving, Constance was with you. I called your name. Do you remember? Reed's mind flashed back. 18 months ago, leaving the office late. Constance walking him to his car, talking about expansion plans. And yes, he remembered. A voice calling his name, Constance's hand on his arm, steering him away. "That's the woman I told you about," she'd said. "The one who's been harassing you. Don't engage. It only encourages her delusions." He'd gotten in his car without looking back. "You got in your car," Bryn said, as if reading his thoughts. "Constance looked at me and smiled, and then she walked over while you drove away. What did she say? She said you didn't want to hear from me, that you'd moved on, that I was nothing but a mistake you were grateful to escape." Bryn wiped at her face with the back of her hand, careful not to disturb Ruby, who was still nursing. "She said if I tried to contact you again, she'd make sure I regretted it. And then she asked if I was pregnant. Oh God." I didn't answer, but I didn't have to. She could see it. And she said, Bryn's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She said, "How unfortunate," and walked away. Hazel finished nursing. Bryn lifted her to her shoulder, patting her back with gentle rhythm until a tiny burp emerged. Then she switched babies, settling Ruby on her other shoulder, while Hazel took her turn at the breast. "The paternity test," Reed said. He was grasping now, trying to find solid ground in the earthquake of revelations. The one that proved the baby wasn't mine. There was no test. Bryn's eyes met his, over Hazel's dark hair. "I was never asked to provide DNA. Your precious mentor showed you paperwork for a test that never happened. But the photographs," Reed's voice was desperate now. "The witnesses. Everyone said, everyone lied." "Everyone lied," Bryn confirmed. "Everyone your mentor paid to lie. And you believed all of them instead of me. The weight of it was too much." Reed's legs gave out completely. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his expensive suit crumpling against cheap carpet. "Your wife," Bryn continued, and now there was emotion in her voice. Raw, bleeding emotion. "The woman who stood at an altar and promised you everything. The woman who believed in you when Hawthorne Technologies was just code on a laptop and dreams. The woman who dropped out of college to work so you could finish your degree. You believed I would betray you, and you didn't even ask me if it was true. You just left. When did you know?" Reed asked. His face was wet. When had he started crying? About the pregnancy? The day after you filed for divorce. Bryn's voice went soft with memory. "I took 3 tests because I couldn't believe it. All positive. I was going to surprise you that night. I'd bought this little frame that said, 'Daddy's first photo.' I'd already made an appointment at the clinic for an ultrasound. I thought we'd see our baby together." "Oh God, Bryn, don't." The sharpness was back. "Don't you dare fall apart now. You don't get to be the victim here. I destroyed you." "Yes, you did." Silence filled the apartment. Just the sound of Hazel nursing, the rattle of the space heater, the distant city beyond walls too thin to keep out cold or noise or reality. Reed stared at his hands. These hands had written the code that made him millions. These hands had signed contracts and shaken hands with investors and built something from nothing. These hands had also signed divorce papers without reading them thoroughly, had accepted Constance's evidence without question, had blocked Bryn's number and deleted her emails and removed her from his life like she was a virus to be eliminated. "Tell me about when they were born," he said quietly. "Reed, please, I need to know. I need to understand what you went through." Bryn was quiet for so long Reed thought she wouldn't answer. Then, her voice distant, she began. "I went into labor at work. I was cleaning offices at Whitmore University, our university, Reed, the place where we met, where we fell in love in that stupid computer science lab because you couldn't figure out why your code wouldn't compile, and I showed you the missing semicolon." "I remember," Reed whispered. "I was vacuuming a classroom when my water broke. 3 weeks early. I thought I had time. Everything I'd read said first babies take forever. But the contractions came hard and fast. I couldn't afford an ambulance, so I called a cab." "Bryn, let me finish." He nodded, throat too tight to speak. The cab driver was kind. He kept asking if I was okay, if he should pull over. I remember gripping the door handle so hard I thought I'd break it. When we got to the county hospital, they rushed me in. Everything happened so fast. They were asking about insurance, about emergency contacts, about payment, and I had no answers they wanted to hear. She adjusted Hazel again, her movements automatic, the muscle memory of months doing this alone. No insurance, no family, no one coming. I remember the intake nurse looking at me with pity. This should have been the happiest day of your life, I could see her thinking. And instead, here you are, alone. Reed's hands clenched into fists. Hazel was born first. She came out crying, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Then Ruby came, quieter, smaller. They put them on my chest for maybe 30 seconds before taking them away to check them. And I lay there on that delivery table thinking, this was supposed to be us. You and me, meeting our babies together. I'm so sorry. Something went wrong. Bryn's voice remained steady, but tears were flowing freely now. I started bleeding. A lot. Suddenly, there were more people in the room, and everyone was moving fast, and someone was putting a mask over my face. I remember thinking I couldn't die. I couldn't leave those babies alone. They needed me. No one else was coming for them. Oh God, Bryn. Oh God. I woke up 2 days later. They told me I'd nearly died. They told me the twins were in the NICU because they were early and small. They told me I couldn't see them yet because I was too weak to walk. So I just lay there in a ward with other mothers who had visitors and flowers and joy. And I had nothing. Reed was sobbing now. Full, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. No one came. No one called. It was like I'd disappeared from the world. And the only proof I still existed was the pain in my body and the milk that came in with no babies to feed. I'm sorry. The words were useless, inadequate, but they kept pouring out. I'm so sorry, Bryn. I'm so sorry. I spent 4 days in that hospital. 4 days watching other mothers leave with their babies, while mine stayed in the NICU. When I finally got to hold them, I cried so hard the nurses thought something was wrong. But nothing was wrong. Everything was finally right. I had my girls. They were mine. And I promised them that day that I would never let anyone hurt them, never let anyone make them feel unwanted or unloved or like they were mistakes. They're not mistakes. Reed forced the words through his tears. They're perfect. They're beautiful. And I wasn't there. No, you weren't. Bryn looked down at Hazel, who'd finished eating and was starting to drift off. She held both babies now, one on each shoulder, and even in this broken apartment, even exhausted and emotionally shattered, she looked like exactly what she was, a mother who'd survived hell to protect her children. But I'm here now, Reed said, and I swear to you, Bryn, I swear on everything I have that I will never walk away from them again. What about me? The question was so quiet, he almost missed it. Can you swear you won't walk away from me? Reed opened his mouth, then closed it, because the honest answer was that he didn't know. He wanted to promise, wanted to say he'd never leave, never doubt, never fail her again. But those were the same kinds of promises he'd made at their wedding, and he'd broken every single one. I can't promise I won't mess up again, he said slowly. I can't promise I'll always get it right, but I can promise I'll try. I can promise I'll fight to be better. I can promise that even if you never forgive me, even if you never let me back into your heart, I'll still be here for our daughters. That's not enough. I know. Bryn stood, moving to the cribs with careful precision. She laid each baby down gently, covering them with thin blankets, adjusting their positions until both were comfortable. When she turned back to Reed, her face was composed again. Empty again. Your mentor sent you that package, the one with the medical records. Reed nodded. She wants you to make her problem go away. I'm suing Hawthorne Technologies and I won't back down. She thinks you'll either scare me into dropping the lawsuit or buy me off. She doesn't understand that I stopped being afraid of her the day I gave birth alone and survived. She moved to the sink, washing her hands with methodical care. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to decide what kind of father you want to be. And then, if you choose to come back, you're going to knock like a civilized human being instead of breaking down my door. Bryn, get out, Reed. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. Something in her tone made him move toward the door. Come back tomorrow if you want to talk about the girls. But tonight, I need you gone. I need to process the fact that you know where we are. I need to figure out how to sleep knowing that. Reed paused at the threshold, looking back at the woman he'd married in a courthouse on a rainy Tuesday because they couldn't wait another day to be husband and wife. The woman who'd believed in him when Hawthorne Technologies was just dreams and code. The woman who'd become a mother without him. I'm sorry, he said again. I know. Bryn's voice was tired. But sorry doesn't feed my daughters. Sorry doesn't give me back 18 months. Sorry doesn't undo the fact that when it mattered most, You chose Constance's lies over my truth. So take your sorry and leave. Come back when you have something more useful to offer." The door closed between them with a quiet click. Reed stood in the hallway staring at the broken lock, the splintered frame, the physical evidence of his violence. Inside the apartment, he heard Bryn begin to cry. Not the quiet tears from earlier. These were deep, wrenching sobs that sounded like they were being torn from somewhere vital, like she'd been holding them back for 18 months, and his appearance had broken whatever dam she'd built to contain them. Reed pressed his forehead against the door. His own tears fell, splashing onto cheap hallway carpet. Behind the door, one of the twins began to whimper. Immediately, Bryn's crying stopped. He heard her moving, heard her soft voice. "Shh, Hazel. It's okay, baby girl. Mama's here. Mama's always here." The words were a lullaby, and an accusation rolled into one. Reed pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to unlock it. He scrolled to Constance's contact, stared at her name for a long moment, then kept scrolling. He found what he was looking for. A lawyer who specialized in family law, someone Constance didn't have her claws in. He sent a text. "I need help. It's urgent. A lawsuit I need to support, not fight. A restraining order against my former mentor. And I need to figure out how to be a father to children whose mother has every reason to hate me. Can you help?" The response came quickly. "Yes. Office opens at 8. Be there." Reed sat down in the hallway, his back against the wall across from Bryn's apartment. If she tried to leave, he'd see her. If she needed anything, he'd be there. It wasn't much. It wasn't close to enough. But it was what he could do. Inside the apartment, he heard Bryn singing to Hazel, the same lullaby from before. Her voice cracked on every note. Reed put his head in his hands and waited for morning, knowing that when it came, he'd have to face the full truth of what Constance had done, what he'd allowed to happen, what it would take to even begin to make this right, if making it right was even possible. The night stretched long and cold. Reed's expensive suit provided no warmth against concrete stairs and November air seeping through poorly insulated walls. He didn't care. Every so often, he heard sounds from Bryn's apartment, the twins crying, Bryn's footsteps, her soft voice soothing babies back to sleep, the creak of the rocking chair, evidence of life continuing in there, life he'd had no part in creating. Around 3 in the morning, his phone buzzed. A message from his investigator. The man worked fast. Reed had hired him 2 days ago after finding those documents in Constance. Safe, after the world he thought he knew started cracking apart. The message contained a link to a secure server. Reed opened it, and for the next hour, he read through evidence that made his stomach turn. The paternity test had been fabricated by a lab technician on Constance's payroll. Payment, $50,000, and a glowing recommendation that got him a position at a prestigious research facility. The photographs showing Bryn with another man had been staged. The investigator had tracked down the actor. His name was Jeremy Cole, and he'd been paid $10,000 for a day's work. Didn't even know what the photos were for. Just thought it was some kind of corporate headshot session. The witnesses who'd claimed to see Bryn meeting this mystery man had all received significant bonuses around the time they gave their statements. All of them worked for companies with ties to Constance. But it went deeper. Constance had contacted Bryn's employer and suggested they run a background check. Then she'd supplied them with fabricated information about Bryn being unstable, unreliable, a potential liability. Bryn had been fired 2 days after Reed filed for divorce. She'd contacted Bryn's landlord and offered to buy the building at above market value. The landlord had evicted Bryn immediately to secure the sale. She'd spread rumors through Seattle's professional networks. Anyone who might have hired Bryn suddenly heard she was difficult, dishonest, dangerous. And when Bryn was pregnant, desperate, trying to find work, trying to find housing, trying to survive, Constance had even contacted the county hospital. She'd attempted to have Bryn flagged as a potential child abuser, to have the babies removed at birth. That attempt had failed. The medical staff had seen through it, had recognized it for what it was. But the fact that Constance had tried, Reed read about the day the twins were born. The medical records were clinical, factual, but between the lines he could see the nightmare. Patient arrived in active labor. No prenatal care documented. Patient reports no support system. No insurance. Unable to pay. They'd taken her anyway because they legally had to. Patient delivered twin A at 2:17 a.m. Twin B at 2:24 a.m. Patient began hemorrhaging at 2:31 a.m. Emergency surgical intervention required. The next several pages detailed efforts to stop the bleeding, to save Bryn's life while her newborn daughters were whisked away to NICU. Patient stabilized at 3:49 a.m. Significant blood loss. Patient will require extended recovery. Social worker notes painted an even grimmer picture. Patient has no family support, no partner present, no means of caring for infants upon discharge. Attempted to connect patient with resources. Patient declined shelter placement, stating she would find alternative arrangements. The alternative arrangements, Reed learned from later reports, had been a friend's couch for 3 weeks, then a women's shelter, then this apartment, secured through a program for single mothers in crisis. Reed closed his phone. He couldn't read anymore. This was what his blind trust in Constance had cost. This was what his failure to believe in Bryn had done. Dawn came slowly, bleeding gray light through the hallway window. Reed hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Bryn hemorrhaging on an operating table while he was 3,000 miles away, celebrating Hawthorne Technologies' latest acquisition. Around 6, he heard movement in Bryn's apartment. The twins waking up. Bryn's footsteps. Her voice, brighter now, different from the flat tone she'd used with him. "Good morning, my beautiful girls. Yes, you're awake. Is somebody hungry? I bet somebody's hungry." The sound of her being a mother to their children, the tenderness in her voice, the love, it destroyed him. At 7, a contractor arrived. Reed had texted him in the middle of the night. The man took one look at the splintered doorframe and shook his head. "You did this?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Because I'm an idiot who destroyed everything good in his life and is trying to stop making things worse." The contractor considered this. "Fair enough. I can fix it. Going to cost you. I don't care what it costs. Make it secure. Make it so she feels safe. Install the best lock you can get, something that can't be kicked in by an angry idiot like me." The contractor nodded and got to work. 20 minutes later, Bryn's door opened. She peered out, saw Reed still sitting against the opposite wall, and her expression cycled through surprise, anger, exhaustion. "You stayed out here all night." "I couldn't leave, not knowing you and the girls were behind a broken door. That's not your responsibility anymore. It's exactly my responsibility. I'm the one who broke it." Bryn started to close the door, but the contractor spoke up. "Ma'am, I need to remove this whole frame to fix it properly. Going to take a few hours. You might want to keep your babies in the back of the apartment where the noise won't scare them." She studied the contractor, then looked at Reed with an expression that could have frozen fire. "You called someone. I broke it. I'm fixing it. Stop making decisions for me. Stop swooping in like some hero. You don't get to save me now, Reed. I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to stop actively harming you." Bryn disappeared into the apartment. Reed heard her moving around, heard the twins babbling, heard her speaking to them in those soft mother tones. When she emerged 10 minutes later, she was dressed in worn jeans and a faded sweater, her hair pulled back, her face bare of makeup. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "I have to go to work," she said, not meeting his eyes. "My neighbor Dorothy will watch the girls. You need to be gone when I get back." "Where do you work?" "That's not your concern." "Bryn, please, I'm not interrogating you. I'm trying to understand your life." She finally looked at him, and the rage in her eyes made him physically recoil. "You want to understand? Fine. I cleaned classrooms at Whitmore University. Our university, Reed. The place where we met, where we promised each other we'd change the world together. I scrubbed toilets in the computer science building, where you taught me to code. I emptied trash cans from offices of professors who used to know me as a student. I wear a uniform with someone else's name on it because I couldn't afford to get my own made." Her voice rose, and inside the apartment, one of the twins started crying. "I work 8 hours there. Then I go to my second job cleaning offices downtown. I finish around 6 if I'm lucky, later if they need extra help. I come home. I feed my daughters. I bathe them. I put them to bed. And then I stay awake worrying about everything I can't afford to give them. That's my life, Reed. Not interesting. Not dramatic. Just survival. Let me help." "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't trust that you won't wake up tomorrow and decide this is too hard. I don't trust that Constance won't find some new way to poison your mind against me. I don't trust that you actually want to be here and not just here because you feel guilty. Bryn, get out. She went back inside, and Reed heard her comforting the crying baby. Shh, Ruby. It's okay. Mama didn't mean to yell. Everything's okay. Dorothy arrived shortly after, a kind-faced woman in her 70s who gave Reed a long, assessing look before entering Bryn's apartment. When Bryn came back out, ready for work, she didn't even glance in Reed's direction. She just left. Reed stood, his body protesting after a night on cold concrete. He watched Bryn disappear down the stairs, then made a decision. He followed her, not closely, not obviously, but he followed her across the Whitmore University campus to a maintenance building on the edge of the property. Watched her clock in. Watched her put on a uniform that hung loose on her too thin frame. Watched her load a cart with cleaning supplies and disappear into the first building on her route, the computer science building. Reed's chest tightened. He'd taken classes in that building. So had Bryn. They'd met in a lab on the second floor. She'd been the only woman in a room full of men who either ignored her or condescended to her, and she'd been smarter than all of them. He'd been struggling with an assignment, ready to give up, when she'd leaned over and pointed at his screen. You're missing a semicolon. Line 47. He'd looked at the line, seen she was right, and fallen a little bit in love right then. Now she was cleaning that building. Reed pulled out his phone and called his head of human resources. I need employment records for Bryn Sullivan. Everything from her application to her termination. And I need a list of every company that refused to hire her in the last 18 months, with documentation of why. The HR director was quiet for a moment. Reed, are you sure about this? That information might be uncomfortable. I'm sure. I need it by noon. You'll have it. Next, Reed called his private investigator. The evidence you sent. I need you to verify every piece. I need to know exactly how deep Constance's manipulation went. I need to know everyone she paid, everything she fabricated, every single thing she did. That's going to take time. You have 24 hours. Reed, I'm paying you enough to make it possible. Make it possible. He ended the call and stood there on the edge of campus, watching the building where Bryn was working, where she was scrubbing toilets and emptying trash and surviving. This was what he'd done to her. This was the cost of his failure to believe. Around noon, the HR records arrived. Reed sat on a bench and read through them, his anger building with every page. Bryn's termination paperwork cited performance issues, attitude problems, conflicts with management. But Reed could see the dates. She'd been a model employee for 2 years. Excellent reviews, commendations, a promotion track. Then Reed had filed for divorce. 2 days later, her performance reviews started changing. Written warnings about things that had never been problems before. Complaints from a manager who'd given her stellar reviews just weeks earlier. 1 week after the divorce was finalized, she'd been terminated. The severance package she should have received had been denied. The reason given, termination for cause. Reed dug deeper into the files, found the bonus payment to the manager who'd written the negative reviews. $50,000. Paid from a discretionary fund that Constance controlled. The list of companies that had refused to hire Bryn was even more damning. 47 applications, 47 rejections, and attached to each rejection was a note in the HR system. Reference check returned negative information. Candidate not suitable. Reed called 3 of the companies, identified himself as Bryn's ex-husband, which was technically true, and asked what specific information they'd received. The first HR manager was reluctant to share. Look, the woman said, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but we were contacted by someone claiming to be a former supervisor. They said Miss Sullivan had been terminated for theft, that she'd been volatile, potentially dangerous. We couldn't take that risk. Who contacted you? I don't remember the name. It was 18 months ago. Do you have records? I can check. Please. 10 minutes later, the HR manager called back. The reference came from a consulting firm, Merrick Associates. Reed's blood turned to ice. Thank you, he said, and ended the call. He didn't need to call the other companies. He knew what he'd find. Constance Merrick had systematically destroyed Bryn's ability to work, to earn, to survive. And she'd done it with surgical precision, using her connections and resources to spread lies that followed Bryn everywhere she tried to go. Reed called his lawyer. I need to file a lawsuit. against Constance Merrick personally, not just as a representative of Hawthorne Technologies. Fraud, defamation, interference with business relationships, everything you can think of. And I need to add my name as a supporting witness to Bryn Sullivan's existing lawsuit against the company. Reed, the lawyer said carefully, if you do this, you're essentially suing yourself. Hawthorne Technologies is your company. I don't care. Bryn deserves justice. And if I have to bankrupt my own company to give it to her, that's what I'll do. There was a pause. All right, I'll draw up the papers. One more thing. I need a restraining order against Constance, barring her from any contact with Bryn Sullivan or Reed Swallowed Hard, or my daughters, Hazel and Ruby Hawthorne. Saying their names out loud for the first time broke something open in his chest. I'll handle it, the lawyer said quietly. Reed, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Doing the right thing doesn't undo doing the wrong thing for 18 months. No, but it's a start. Reed ended the call and looked up at the computer science building. Bryn had emerged, pushing her cleaning cart toward the next building on her route. He watched her work for 6 hours, watched her move between buildings, emptying trash, cleaning classrooms, scrubbing bathrooms. She was efficient, thorough, professional. She smiled at students who passed her, said hello to other maintenance staff, existed in a world that didn't know she'd once been on track to graduate with honors, that she'd sacrificed her education so Reed could finish his, that she'd believed in him when Hawthorne Technologies was just a dream. Around 6, Bryn clocked out. Reed followed her to a bus stop, watched her board, followed in his car. She got off downtown, went into an office building, changed into a different uniform, started her second shift. More offices, more trash, more cleaning. She worked until 10. When she finally headed home, Reed was waiting outside her building. Not in the hallway this time, just outside, making sure she got home safely. He saw her climb the stairs, saw a light go on in her apartment, imagined her greeting Dorothy, checking on the twins, beginning the nighttime routine of feeding and bathing and putting babies to bed. He wanted to be part of that, wanted it so badly it physically hurt. But Bryn had told him to stay away, so he did. He went to his own apartment, his penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, and the luxury of it made him sick. Original hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen he never cooked in because he always ordered out, a second bedroom he used for storage. He had more space than he needed, more money than he could spend, everything except what mattered. Reed pulled out his laptop and began drafting an email to his board of directors. It was time to make changes at Hawthorne Technologies, starting with removing Constance Merrick from every position of power she held. Around midnight, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Dorothy, Bryn's neighbor. She doesn't know I'm texting you, but I thought you should know the girls were asking for Dada tonight. Bryn cried after they fell asleep. Whatever you did to that woman, you need to fix it. Those babies need a father, and Bryn needs someone to believe in again. Reed stared at the message for a long time. Then he texted back, "Thank you for telling me. I'm trying to fix it. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I'm trying. Try harder. You're running out of time." What do you mean? Bryn's barely holding on. She's exhausted. She's scared, and she's too proud to ask for help. So if you're serious about being in their lives, you need to show up. Not with money, not with grand gestures. Just show up and be steady. Be the person she needed 18 months ago. Reed read the message 3 times. Then he made a decision. The next morning, he was waiting outside Bryn's apartment when she left for work. She stopped when she saw him, her expression guarded. "I told you to stay away." "I know, but I can't." Reed held up a coffee cup. "I brought you coffee, the way you like it. 2 sugars, extra cream, cinnamon on top." Bryn stared at the cup like it might explode. "I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness," Reed said quickly. "I'm not trying to manipulate you or force my way into your life. I just remembered you never drink coffee before work, and I thought maybe things are different now. Maybe you need it now, because of the twins and the late nights and the 2 jobs." Slowly, carefully, Bryn took the coffee. She didn't say thank you, didn't smile, just took it and walked away. But she took it. And Reed counted that as progress. That evening, when Bryn came home from her second shift, there were groceries outside her door. Not extravagant, just staples. Milk, bread, eggs, formula, diapers, things she needed. There was a note. No strings, no expectations. Just help. You can accept it or throw it away. Your choice. The next morning, the groceries were gone. Brought inside, Reed started a pattern. Coffee in the morning, left at her door before she woke up. Groceries twice a week. The broken door had been fixed, reinforced, given a lock that would withstand a battering ram. He'd paid the contractor extra to make sure Bryn knew she controlled the only key. He didn't approach her, didn't demand time with the twins, didn't push. He just showed up, consistently, quietly, proving through action that he wasn't going anywhere. 2 weeks passed. Then one evening, as Reed was leaving another delivery of groceries, Bryn's door opened. She stood there, one twin on her hip. Ruby, he thought, and looked at him with exhausted eyes. You're persistent. I'm trying to be present. Why? Because I failed you. I failed our daughters. And I can't undo that. But I can try to stop failing you going forward. Bryn was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, There's a nanny service. They called me. Said they're offering free childcare to single mothers through some grant program. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that? Reed had the grace to look embarrassed. I might have funded a program, but it's real. It's not just for you. There are 20 other mothers in Seattle benefiting from it. You're lying. No, I swear. I funded it for you, but I made it real for others so it wouldn't be charity, so you could use it without feeling like you owed me. Bryn stopped. That's actually thoughtful. I'm capable of learning. Are you? She studied him for a long moment. Ruby grabbed at her hair and Bryn gently untangled tiny fingers without looking away from Reed. The nanny's name is Dorothy, isn't it? She said. The service matched you with someone they thought would be a good fit. Dorothy lives down the hall. She's the one who's been helping me with the girls since they were born. Is she good with them? She's wonderful with them. Then I'm glad the service matched you with someone you already trust. Bryn almost smiled. Almost. You're a terrible liar, Reed Hawthorne. Always have been. You used to tease me about it. I used to do a lot of things. The weight of that statement settled between them. Bryn, Reed started, but she held up a hand. Come inside. For 1 hour. You can meet your daughters properly, not through a crisis or confrontation. Just meet them. Reed's heart hammered. Are you sure? No, but I'm tired of fighting alone. And Dorothy's right. The girls need to know their father. So 1 hour. You sit on the floor. You play with them. You see who they are. And then you leave. Okay? Okay. Bryn stepped back, letting him into the apartment. It looked different from the last time he'd been inside. Cleaner, yes, but also more lived in. The twins' personality was everywhere. Toys scattered across the floor. Pictures they'd scribbled taped to the wall. A routine, a life, evidence of Bryn building something stable even in unstable circumstances. Hazel was in one of the cribs, just waking from a nap. She sat up when she saw Reed, her eyes, his eyes, watching him with that same suspicious intelligence. Girls, Bryn said softly, this is your daddy. He's going to play with you for a little while. Dada? Ruby said, trying out the word. Reed's eyes filled with tears. That's right, baby girl. I'm your Dada. He sat on the floor, and Ruby immediately climbed into his lap like he was a mountain to conquer. Hazel stayed in the crib, watching, assessing. Bryn lifted Hazel out and set her on the floor near Reed. She's cautious, Bryn said. Give her time. Reed nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Ruby was already showing him a toy, a stuffed giraffe with one ear missing. This is Jeffrey, Bryn supplied. He's Ruby's favorite. She drags him everywhere. Hi, Jeffrey, Reed managed. Ruby patted his face with one small hand. Dada, she said again, satisfied with this arrangement. And just like that, Reed fell completely in love with his daughter. Hazel took longer. She stayed on the periphery, playing with blocks, occasionally glancing over to see what her sister and this strange man were doing. But eventually, curiosity won. She toddled over, her steps still a little unsteady, and held up a block. Reed took it carefully, like it was made of glass. Thank you, Hazel. This is a beautiful block. Hazel considered him. Then she put another block on top of the first one. They were building together. The hour passed in a blur. Reed played, read books in silly voices that made Ruby laugh, helped Hazel build block towers so she could knock them down. He memorized everything. The way Ruby's nose crinkled when she laughed. The way Hazel chewed on her bottom lip when she concentrated. The way they communicated with each other in looks and sounds that went beyond words. They were beautiful. Perfect. When Bryn said it was time for him to go, Reed wanted to argue, wanted to beg for more time. But he'd promised 1 hour. So he stood, kissed each daughter on the forehead, his first kiss for them, and headed to the door. "Thank you," he said to Bryn. "They need to know you. Even if I'm angry at you, they deserve a father." Reed nodded. "Same time tomorrow?" Bryn hesitated. Then, 2 days from now. "Same time. 1 hour. I'll be here." And Reed was. 2 days later, he came back. 1 hour with the twins. He brought a children's book as a gift, nothing extravagant, just a story about a bear who couldn't sleep. The pattern continued. Every few days, 1 hour, supervised by Bryn, who watched him like a hawk, ready to intervene if he did anything to upset her daughters. But Reed was careful, patient. He followed Bryn's lead, asked before doing anything, respected boundaries. And slowly, incrementally, Hazel and Ruby grew comfortable with him, started calling for Dada when he arrived, climbed into his lap for stories, fell asleep on his chest during afternoon naps. 3 months passed like this. Reed still brought coffee in the mornings, still arranged grocery deliveries, still funded the nanny service that gave Bryn a few hours of breathing room each week. He still didn't push for more than Bryn was willing to give. And Bryn, slowly, started to soften. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a slight thawing in the permafrost of her anger. One evening, after Reed's hour was up, she said, "Stay for dinner." Reed froze halfway to the door. "What?" "I'm making pasta. Nothing fancy, but the girls should eat with both of us sometimes. So they see us getting along." "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Dinner was awkward at first. They hadn't shared a meal in almost 2 years, hadn't sat across a table from each other except in lawyers' offices. But the twins helped. Ruby flung pasta, narrating her eating in toddler language. Hazel carefully picked up individual noodles with surprising dexterity, methodical in everything she did. "They're so smart," Reed said, watching Hazel. "They are." Bryn wiped sauce off Ruby's face. "Dorothy says they're advanced for their age. They get it from you. From you, too. The intelligence thing. We made something beautiful." Reed's voice was soft. "Even if we destroyed everything else, we made them." Bryn's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. "Yeah, we did." After dinner, they put the girls to bed together. A routine they were developing. Reed read the story while Bryn rocked Hazel. They traded, and Bryn read while Reed settled Ruby. Standing together over the cribs, watching their daughters sleep, felt sacred. "Thank you," Reed said, "for letting me be here. They're your daughters too, I know. But you could keep them from me. Legally, financially, practically. You're the one who survived with them. You're the one who has all the power here." Bryn looked at him in the dim light of the nursery area. "I don't want power. I want co-parents who can function in the same room. I want my daughters to know their father. I want—" She stopped. "What do you want?" "I don't know anymore." She walked to the kitchen area, and Reed followed. Bryn poured herself water, stared out the window at Seattle lights. "I used to want revenge," she said quietly. "I used to want you to hurt the way you hurt me. But now I'm just tired, Reed. I'm so tired of being angry. It's exhausting, carrying this rage around every day. You have every right to be angry. I know, but rights don't make emotions easier to carry. What can I do? Tell me what I can do to make this easier for you." Bryn turned to face him. "Keep showing up. Keep being consistent. Keep being the father they need. That's all I can handle right now. Okay, and maybe—" her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Maybe someday I'll be able to think about what I need. Not just what the girls need. But I'm not there yet. I'll wait. You might be waiting a long time. Then I'll wait a long time." They stood in the kitchen, not touching, the space between them filled with everything broken and everything trying to heal. Reed left shortly after, but something had shifted. The door between them had opened, just a crack. And sometimes, a crack was all you needed for light to start getting through. 3 weeks later, Reed arrived for his usual visit with an envelope in his hand. Bryn saw it immediately. Her face went carefully blank. "What is that?" Something I need you to look at. But first, can I see the girls?" Bryn studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Hazel and Ruby were playing with blocks and both looked up when Reed entered. "Da-da." Ruby abandoned her blocks and ran to him on toddler legs that were getting steadier every day. Reed scooped her up, kissing her forehead. "Hey, baby girl, what are you building?" "Tower," Ruby announced proudly, pointing at a precarious stack of 3 blocks. "That's the best tower I've ever seen." Hazel was more reserved as always, but she brought him a book. The silent request was clear. "Read." Reed settled on the floor with both girls, the envelope forgotten for the moment. He read the book twice, then helped them build towers, then played a game that seemed to involve throwing stuffed animals and laughing when they landed. Normal, domestic, everything he'd thrown away and was desperately trying to earn back. An hour passed. Bryn had been grading papers at the small table she'd re-enrolled in school, using some of the settlement money from the lawsuit, but now she stood. "Girls, it's snack time. Go wash your hands." The twins toddled toward the bathroom, and Bryn turned to Reed. "What's in the envelope?" Reed stood, suddenly nervous. This was either going to help or destroy the fragile trust they'd been building. "Legal documents. But before you get angry, just let me explain." Bryn's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Reed pulled out the papers. "I've set up an irrevocable trust. $10 million. You're the sole trustee." "What?" "The money is yours." "Well, technically it's for you and the girls, but you control it completely. I can't access it. I can't take it back. I have no say in how you use it." Bryn stared at the papers like they might bite her. "Why would you do this?" "Because I never want you to have to choose between formula and heat again. Because you should be able to finish your degree without working yourself into exhaustion. Because you deserve security. And because," Reed's voice dropped, "I never want you to stay with me or let me into the girls' lives because you need to. I want you to have complete freedom to choose. This is $10 million. It's less than you deserve. It's less than I owe you for what you've been through." Bryn set the papers down with shaking hands. "You're giving me the power to walk away from you with enough money that I'd never need anything from you again." "Yes." "Why?" "Because loving you means wanting you to be free, even if that freedom means choosing a life without me in it." Bryn's eyes filled with tears. "That's the most terrifying and beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me." "Is it working? The beautiful part?" "Maybe." She wiped at her eyes. "Maybe a little." The twins came running back, hands still wet because they'd barely washed them, and the moment shifted. Back to normal parenting chaos, snacks distributed, spills cleaned, the ordinary miracle of family life. But something had changed. After snack time, after Reed's visit was technically over, Bryn said, "Stay for dinner again." He'd been staying for dinner once a week, but something in her voice made this different. "Are you sure? The girls like having you here." "And she paused. "I'm getting used to it. Having help. Having someone to share this with." That night, after the twins were in bed, Bryn poured 2 glasses of wine. Cheap wine, because old habits die hard, even with $10 million in a trust she hadn't quite processed yet. They sat on the second-hand couch, carefully not touching, and Bryn said, "Tell me about Constance." Reed tensed. "What do you want to know?" "Why? Why did she hate me so much that she destroyed our lives?" Reed was quiet for a long time. Then he began. "When my parents died, I was 19. Freshman year of college. Car accident. Sudden. Devastating. I had no siblings, no close family. I was completely alone." Bryn's hand moved, almost touching his, then pulled back. "Constance was my dad's business partner. She showed up at the funeral and told me she'd look after me, that my dad would have wanted her to make sure I was okay. She helped me navigate the estate, the lawyers, all of it. And when I told her I wanted to drop out of school, she convinced me to stay, said she'd help me. She mentored you. More than that, she became like family. The only family I had. When I started working on the code that would become Hawthorne Technologies, she was the first person I showed it to. She saw the potential, connected me with investors, helped me build the business plan. Without her, Hawthorne Technologies wouldn't exist, and she thought I was a threat to that." Reed nodded. "When I met you, when I fell in love with you, Constance started making comments, small things at first. Are you sure you have time for a relationship when the company needs you? Does Bryn understand the sacrifices required to build something great? Is she really the right partner for someone in your position? Classic manipulation. I didn't see it. I thought she was just being protective, looking out for me. When did it escalate? When we got married. Reed's voice was rough with memory. We didn't tell anyone, remember? Just went to the courthouse one Tuesday. I remember. I wore that white sundress from Target. You wore jeans and a button-down. We had a stranger as our witness. Best day of my life. Reed looked at her. Until I ruined it. Bryn didn't argue. When Constance found out we'd gotten married, she was furious. Told me I'd made a huge mistake. That you'd trap me, use me, destroy everything we'd built. I defended you. Told her she was wrong. But she planted seeds. What kind of seeds? Doubt. She'd mentioned seeing you places. Having lunch with men. Being friendly with people. Always with this concerned tone. I'm sure it's innocent, but you know how it looks. And I'd tell myself she was paranoid. That I trusted you. But the seeds were there, growing. Until she fabricated the affair. Until she fabricated the affair, Reed confirmed. And by then she'd prepared the ground so well that when she showed me the evidence, fake evidence, I believed it immediately. Because part of me had been primed to believe it. You thought I was too good for you. Reed's head snapped up. What? That's what this is really about, isn't it? You never understood why I chose you. Why I loved you. So when Constance showed you proof that I was betraying you, some part of you thought, of course she'd find someone better. Bryn. Am I wrong? Reed's silence was answer enough. Bryn stood, pacing the small apartment. I loved you because you were brilliant and kind, and you saw me as a person, not just a woman in a male-dominated field. I loved you because you made me laugh, because you believed in building something that mattered, because when I was with you, I felt like I could be myself completely. Past tense, Reed noted, his heart breaking. Yeah, past tense, because the man I loved trusted me, and you're not him anymore. I'm trying to be. I know. Bryn turned to face him. And that's why I'm still letting you in. That's why I took the trust documents, even though every instinct says it's a trap. That's why I let you have dinner with us and put the girls to bed and exist in our lives. Because you're trying. But trying doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't give me back 18 months. It doesn't undo the trauma of giving birth alone or living in shelters or wondering if my babies would have enough to eat. I know. Do you? Because sometimes I look at you playing with the girls and I see the father they deserve. And sometimes I look at you and I see the man who walked away from his pregnant wife without a backward glance. And I don't know how to reconcile those two people. Reed stood, crossing to her but not touching. They're the same person. That's what you have to reconcile. I'm the man who failed you, and I'm the man who's trying to do better. Both things are true. And which one am I supposed to trust? The one who shows up. Every time. No matter what. Even if it takes years. Even if it takes forever. They stood in the small living room, close enough to touch, miles apart in trust. I need you to go now, Bryn said quietly. I need to process all of this. The trust, everything. Reed nodded. He gathered his jacket, headed for the door. Paused. Bryn, I know you don't believe me yet, but I love you. I never stopped. Even when I thought I hated you, it was just love that had nowhere to go. Don't. I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm not asking you to feel anything. I just need you to know. He left before she could respond. Inside the apartment, Bryn sank onto the couch and cried. Because she did feel something. She felt too much, and that was the problem. Loving Reed while not trusting him was like walking a tightrope over a canyon. One wrong step, and she'd fall. And she couldn't afford to fall. Not when she had 2 daughters depending on her to stay strong. But God, she was tired of being strong. The next morning, Bryn found coffee at her door as usual. But this time, there was a note. You don't have to decide anything today, or tomorrow, or next week. Take all the time you need. I'll still be here. Something in Bryn's chest cracked open just a little. That evening, she called the number on the trust documents and scheduled a meeting with the financial advisor. If Reed was serious about giving her this money with no strings, she needed to understand exactly what that meant. The advisor, a woman named Patricia Reeves, met her at a coffee shop near campus. Miss Sullivan, let me be very clear about the terms of this trust. Mr. Hawthorne has no access to these funds. He cannot revoke the trust. He cannot control how you use the money. He's essentially given you $10 million with absolutely no legal recourse if you choose to use it in ways he doesn't approve of. Why would he do that? Patricia smiled slightly. I've been in wealth management for 20 years. I've seen a lot of trusts. Most of them come with conditions. This one is unusual because it has none. My professional opinion? Mr. Hawthorne is trying to prove something. What? That he trusts you, even though he failed to do that before. That he wants you to have choices. That his love, if you'll forgive me getting personal, isn't contingent on you needing him. Bryn absorbed this. And if I take this money and never speak to him again, then you'll have $10 million and he'll have no legal standing to complain. The trust includes provisions for the twins' education and welfare, but even those don't give him any control. You could literally take this money, move to another state, and raise your daughters without him. The trust allows it. That's insane. That's trust. Real trust. Bryn left the meeting with her head spinning. Reed had given her freedom. Complete freedom. The freedom to choose him or not choose him, based purely on whether she wanted to, not whether she needed to. It was the opposite of everything Constance had done. Constance had tried to trap her, control her, destroy her options. Reed was giving her every option. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Bryn sat with the trust documents and cried, because she was beginning to understand that Reed had changed, really changed, in fundamental ways that mattered. But understanding that someone had changed and trusting them not to hurt you again were two very different things. 2 days later, everything went to hell. Bryn came home from class to find her apartment door open. Not broken, just open. And voices inside. Her blood went cold. She rushed in to find Constance Merrick standing in her living room, Dorothy, pressed into a corner looking terrified, and the twins crying in their cribs. Get out. Bryn's voice was deadly calm. Get out of my home right now. Constance turned, and her smile was all sharp edges. Miss Sullivan, we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Get out or I'm calling the police. I'm here to make you a very generous offer. Constance gestured to a man in a suit standing beside her, clearly a lawyer. He opened a briefcase and pulled out documents. $10 million for you to relinquish all parental rights to Reed's children and relocate. Somewhere far from Seattle. Far from my company. Far from the mess you've created. Bryn moved past Constance to the cribs, lifting both twins, holding them close. They clung to her, frightened by the strange, angry woman in their home. Your company? Bryn's voice was ice. Reed owns Hawthorne Technologies. Reed is a child playing at business. I built that company. Everything he has is because of me, and I will not watch him throw it away on someone like you. Someone like me. Bryn settled both girls on her hips, and despite her fear, her voice was steady. You mean someone who actually loves him? Someone who doesn't manipulate him? You're a distraction, a liability. Those children, Constance gestured dismissively at the twins, are complications that need to be resolved. They're human beings. Bryn caught herself. They're Reed's daughters, which is why I'm offering you money to disappear with them. Give them a good life somewhere else. Let Reed move on. No, the word hung in the air. Constance's eyes went hard. I don't think you understand the position you're in. I understand perfectly. You're terrified. You're terrified that Reed is finally seeing you for what you are. A manipulative, cruel woman who destroyed lives to maintain control. And you're terrified that he's choosing us over you. How dare you? How dare I? Bryn's voice rose, and Ruby started crying harder. How dare you? You fabricated evidence. You destroyed my career. You nearly killed me by making sure I couldn't get proper medical care while pregnant. You tried to have my babies taken from me at birth, and now you break into my home and try to buy me off? Constance's hand shot out, striking Bryn across the face before anyone could react. The slap echoed in the small apartment. Both twins began screaming. Dorothy, who'd been frozen in the corner, ran for the door. I'm calling Reed. Bryn stood there, her cheek burning, twins crying in her arms, and looked at Constance with absolute clarity. Get out of my home, now. You're making a mistake. No, the mistake was letting you breathe the same air as my daughters. Get out before I forget that assault charges take time I don't have. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. Ms. Merrick, perhaps we should. We're leaving. Constance's voice was sharp. But this isn't over. You think Reed will choose you? He chose me before. He believed me over you. He'll do it again. No, he won't. Reed's voice came from the doorway. He was breathing hard, like he'd run up the stairs, and his eyes went immediately to Bryn's reddening cheek. Did you hit her? His voice was dangerously quiet. Reed, darling. Constance's tone shifted, becoming gentle, manipulative. I came here to protect you. By assaulting the mother of my children? She's being unreasonable. I offered her a generous settlement. You offered to buy my daughters away from their mother. Reed moved into the apartment, positioning himself between Constance and his family. You broke into her home. You terrified my children. You put your hands on Bryn. I was trying to help you. You were trying to control me, like you've always controlled me. Reed pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. He dialed. While it rang, he said, I've already filed for a restraining order. I have evidence of everything you did. The fabricated affair, the paid witnesses, the systematic destruction of Bryn's employment opportunities, all of it. Constance went pale. You went through my files. I went through my company's files, and I found enough to bury you. A voice came through the phone. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a break-in and assault. Reed gave the address, his eyes never leaving Constance. The lawyer grabbed Constance's arm. We need to leave. Now. This isn't over. Constance hissed as she was pulled toward the door. I made you, Reed. Everything you are is because of me. No. Reed's voice was firm. Everything I could have been, you almost destroyed. But I'm taking it back. I'm taking my life back. And you're never coming near my family again. Constance left with her lawyer, and moments later, they heard sirens. Reed turned to Bryn, who was still holding both crying twins, her cheek red where Constance had struck her. Are you okay? No. Bryn's voice shook. No, I'm not okay. Reed moved toward her carefully. Can I? She nodded, and Reed gently took Ruby from her arms, then Hazel. Both girls clung to him, crying into his shoulders. Shh, he murmured. It's okay. Dada's here. You're safe now. The police arrived. Statements were taken. Dorothy corroborated everything. The assault was documented with photographs of Bryn's cheek. The restraining order was mentioned. Through it all, Reed held the twins, soothing them, while Bryn gave her statement with a composure that was clearly costing her everything. When the police finally left, with assurances that charges would be filed, the apartment felt too small and too big at the same time. I need you to go, Bryn said to Reed. What? I can't, she gestured helplessly. Every time I look at you, I see her. I see how you believed her instead of me. I see how close she came to taking everything. So please, just go. Bryn, please. Reed wanted to argue, wanted to stay, wanted to protect them. But Bryn was asking him to leave, and he'd promised to respect her boundaries. I'll be right outside, he said, in the hallway. I'm not leaving the building. He handed the twins back to Bryn, both girls calmer now but still clinging, and Reed left. He sat on the floor in the hallway, his back against the wall opposite Bryn's door, and listened to her crying. Deep, wrenching sobs that she'd clearly been holding back while the police were there. He heard her comforting the twins, singing to them, putting them to bed with lullabies and gentle words. He heard her moving around the apartment, cleaning up from Constance's invasion, reclaiming her space. And when it went quiet, he knew she was sitting alone, processing everything. Around midnight, Bryn's door opened. She stood there in pajamas, her eyes red from crying, and looked down at him. You're still here. I said I would be. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know if I can do this. Do what? Trust you. Trust anyone. Constance just broke into my home, Reed. She threatened my children. She hit me. And she's connected to you. Everything bad that's happened to me in the last 2 years is connected to you. I know. So how do I let you into our lives when your presence brings danger? Reed stood. Constance is being charged with assault. The restraining order will be granted. I've removed her from every position at Hawthorne Technologies. She has no power anymore. Are you sure about that? Yes. Bryn searched his face. If I let you back in, if I really let you be part of our lives, I need to know you'll choose us. Every time, no matter what. I will, even if it costs you everything, especially then. Bryn's eyes filled again. I want to believe you, then believe me. Reed stepped closer. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking you to let me keep proving that I've changed. How long will you keep proving it? However long it takes. Bryn wiped at her eyes. I hate that I still love you. I hate it so much. You love me? I never stopped, even when I hated you. Even when I was giving birth alone and cursing your name. Even when I was living in shelters with newborns and wondering how I'd survive. Some stupid part of me loved you through all of it. Bryn, don't. She held up a hand. Loving you doesn't mean I trust you. It doesn't mean we're okay. It just means I'm weak. You're not weak. You're the strongest person I've ever known. If I was strong, I'd walk away. I'd take that trust fund money and move somewhere you'd never find us. I'd protect my daughters from any possibility of more pain. But you're not going to do that. No, because they deserve a father who's trying, and I deserve a chance to see if broken things can actually be fixed. They stood in the hallway, close enough to touch, a canyon of hurt between them. I'm scared, Bryn whispered. Me too. What if this doesn't work? Then at least we tried. And if you hurt me again? Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Bryn stepped back. Come inside. Not forever. Not as a solution. But tonight, I don't want to be alone. Are you sure? No. But I'm doing it anyway. Reed followed her inside, and Bryn closed the door behind them. They didn't talk about the future, didn't make promises, didn't pretend that one night of vulnerability fixed 18 months of damage. They just sat on the couch, not quite touching, and existed in the same space. Eventually, Bryn's head dropped onto Reed's shoulder. He froze, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Just this, she murmured. Just let me have this for tonight, okay? Tomorrow, I might be angry again. Okay. Tomorrow I might push you away. I'll be here anyway. Bryn's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. I don't know how to do this, she said. I don't know how to love you and protect myself at the same time. Maybe you don't have to figure it out all at once. One day at a time? One day at a time. They fell asleep like that, on the couch, hands linked, two broken people trying to figure out if healing was possible. In the cribs, Hazel and Ruby slept peacefully, unaware that their parents were slowly, painfully, beginning to build something new from the ruins of what had been destroyed. Outside, Seattle moved through night into dawn, and in that small apartment, hope flickered. Fragile, uncertain. But there, morning came too soon and not soon enough. Reed woke on Bryn's couch with a crick in his neck and her hand still in his. She was awake already, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. This doesn't fix everything, she said quietly. I know. And it doesn't mean we're back together. I know that too. But maybe, she paused, searching for words. Maybe we can try to be something new. Not what we were before. Something different. What does that look like? Bryn sat up, pulling her hand away, and immediately Reed felt the loss of contact. It looks like you being present. Consistently. It looks like us figuring out how to co-parent without all this anger. It looks like me learning to trust you again, one day at a time, while you prove that I can. I'll prove it. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Bryn stood, moving to check on the twins, who were starting to stir in their cribs. Ruby sat up first, her hair sticking up in every direction, and when she saw Reed still there, her face lit up. Dada, stay! The simple joy in her voice cracked something open in Reed's chest. Yeah, baby girl. Dada stayed. Hazel woke more slowly, as always, but when she registered that Reed was there in the morning, something new, she looked pleased. They had breakfast together. Reed made scrambled eggs, while Bryn got the girls dressed. It was domestic and strange and perfect and terrifying all at once. After breakfast, after Reed had left with promises to return that evening, Bryn sat with Dorothy over coffee. The older woman had been quiet through breakfast, but now she looked at Bryn with knowing eyes. You're falling for him again. I never stopped falling for him. That's the problem. That's not a problem, honey. That's called love. Love that got me destroyed once already, Bryn countered. Love that left me giving birth alone. Love that. Love that survived, Dorothy interrupted. You loved him through the worst thing he could do to you. You loved him while raising his children alone. You loved him while hating him. That kind of love doesn't just disappear because it's inconvenient. But what if he hurts me again? What if he doesn't? What if he's actually changed? What if you're so busy protecting yourself from past pain that you miss out on future joy? Bryn was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to stop being afraid. You don't stop being afraid. You just decide that what you want is worth the risk. And what if I'm wrong? Then you'll survive, just like you survived before. But Bryn, honey, surviving isn't the same as living. And those girls deserve to see their mama living, not just surviving. The words settled into Bryn's heart and took root. That evening, when Reed returned, Bryn made a decision. I want you to move into the building. What? Not into this apartment, but into the building. Close enough to be present every day. Close enough that the girls can see you whenever they want. Close enough that we can learn to be whatever we're going to be. Are you sure? No. But I'm doing it anyway. 3 days later, Reed moved into an apartment 2 floors down. It wasn't his penthouse with the view of Elliott Bay. It was a simple 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better days. But it was close to his daughters, close to Bryn, and that made it worth more than any luxury. The routine they established was cautious at first. Reed would come up in the mornings, have breakfast with the girls, leave for work, return in the evening for dinner, spend time with the twins, then go back to his own apartment. It was KO parenting with the potential for more, hanging unspoken between them. But slowly, gradually, the routine expanded. Reed staying later, helping with bedtime, reading stories, rocking the girls to sleep, Bryn asking him to stay for a movie after the twins were down, Reed bringing groceries and cooking dinner for all of them, Bryn laughing at his jokes again. Actually laughing, not the polite acknowledgement she'd been giving him for months. Small moments that built into something bigger. 6 weeks after Constance's assault, the legal consequences came down. Constance Merrick was formally charged with assault, breaking and entering, and harassment. The restraining order was granted, barring her from any contact with Bryn, Reed, or the twins. But Reed wasn't satisfied with criminal charges. He'd spent weeks gathering evidence, working with lawyers, building a case. And now he was ready. The lawsuit he filed was comprehensive. Fraud, defamation, intentional interference with business relationships, intentional infliction of emotional distress, civil conspiracy. Every single thing Constance had done, laid out in legal language that didn't capture the emotional devastation but captured enough for a court to understand. Bryn's existing lawsuit against Hawthorne Technologies was amended. Reed added his name as a supporting witness, provided internal documents, testified about Constance's manipulation. The deposition happened in a sterile conference room that felt too small for the weight of everything being discussed. Bryn sat across from Constance for the first time since the assault, and she refused to look away, refused to be intimidated. Miss Sullivan, Constance's lawyer began, you allege that my client fabricated evidence to end your marriage to Mr. Hawthorne. I don't allege it. I'm stating it as fact. That's a serious accusation. It's a true accusation, and I have proof. Bryn's lawyer slid documents across the table, bank records showing payments to the lab technician who'd fabricated the paternity test, contracts with the modeling agency that had provided the actor for the affair photos, witness statements from former Hawthorne Technologies employees who'd been pressured into lying. Every piece of evidence Reed had gathered, now part of the official record. Constance's lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable as the deposition continued. Then Reed was called to testify. He sat in the chair, looked directly at Constance, and spoke with absolute clarity. Constance Merrick manipulated me for years. She used my grief over my parents' death to position herself as the only family I had. She isolated me from other relationships. And when I married Bryn, when I found something good that didn't involve Constance, she systematically destroyed it. Mr. Hawthorne, the lawyer tried to interrupt. I'm not finished. Reed's voice was firm. She fabricated evidence. She paid people to lie. She used company resources to ruin my wife's career. She tried to have my children taken from their mother at birth, and she did all of it while convincing me it was for my own good. He pulled out a USB drive and handed it to Bryn's lawyer. This drive contains evidence of everything I just said. Emails, payment records, recorded conversations, all of it legally obtained from company files that I, as CEO, have full access to. Constance's face had gone from pale to red. Reed, she started, her voice taking on that gentle, manipulative tone. Don't. Reed cut her off. Don't try to manipulate me anymore. I see you now. I see exactly what you are. And I'm making sure everyone else sees it too. The deposition ended with Constance's lawyer requesting a recess to consult with his client. Outside the conference room, Bryn turned to Reed. Thank you. For what? For believing me. Finally. For standing up to her. For, her voice caught, for choosing us. There was never a choice, Bryn. There was only me being too blind to see what mattered. You see it now. I see it now. They stood in the hallway, and for the first time in months, Bryn let herself lean into him. Just slightly. Just enough. Reed's arms came around her carefully, like she might break or bolt. But Bryn stayed. Is this okay? Reed asked quietly. Yeah. This is okay. They stood like that for a long moment, healing happening in increments too small to measure but too real to deny. The lawsuit settled 3 weeks later. Constance Merrick agreed to pay Bryn $5 million in damages. She resigned from all positions at Hawthorne Technologies, and she signed an agreement never to contact Reed, Bryn, or the twins again. It was justice, as much as justice could be found in a courtroom. But more than the money, more than the legal victory, it was closure. The woman who destroyed their lives had been held accountable. Bryn could breathe again. With the settlement money and the trust Reed had established, Bryn was financially secure for the first time in years. She quit both her cleaning jobs, enrolled full-time in school, started building the life she'd put on hold when she'd dropped out to support Reed's dreams. And Reed was there for all of it, watching the twins while Bryn studied for exams, celebrating when she aced a particularly difficult project, supporting her when she struggled with balancing motherhood and education, being present, consistently, without fanfare or expectation of praise, just showing up. The twins were growing fast. At 2 years old, they were becoming little people with distinct personalities and opinions about everything. Ruby was fearless. She climbed everything, explored constantly, made friends with every person and animal she encountered. She had Reed's curiosity and drive, Bryn's social intelligence. Hazel was thoughtful. She watched before acting, planned before building, considered before speaking. She had Bryn's analytical mind, Reed's careful precision, and they adored each other with a kind of fierce sibling love that meant they'd defend each other against anything, while also fighting over toys with dramatic flair. Reed learned their rhythms. Ruby needed to burn energy before bed, or she'd never sleep. Hazel needed quiet time in the afternoon, or she'd become overwhelmed. Ruby loved being read to. Hazel loved building blocks. He learned that bath time was chaos and bedtime was sacred, that they had different cries for different needs, that Hazel would tell you she wasn't tired right up until the moment she fell asleep mid-sentence. He learned to be a father, and Bryn watched him learn, watched him try, watched him show up every single day, and slowly, the walls around her heart began to crumble. It happened in small moments. Reed staying up all night with a sick Ruby so Bryn could sleep before an exam. Reed remembering that Bryn liked her coffee with extra cinnamon on Thursdays, because Thursdays were her hardest class days. Reed installing shelves in the apartment without being asked because Bryn had mentioned needing more storage. Reed defending Bryn to an old colleague who made a dismissive comment about single mothers going back to school. Reed showing up to Bryn's presentation for her business strategy class and sitting in the back row beaming with pride. 1,000 small actions that said, I'm here, I see you, I choose you. One evening, 4 months after Constance's assault, Bryn and Reed were cleaning up after dinner while the twins played. Thank you, Bryn said, handing him a dish to dry. For what? For being here. For all of it. Reed set down the dish and turned to face her. Bryn, I need to tell you something. She tensed slightly, old instincts preparing for bad news. I love you. I know I've said it before, but I need you to understand. I love you more now than I did when we got married, because now I love you with full knowledge of what I almost lost. I love you having seen you survive the impossible. I love you with complete understanding of how strong and brilliant and remarkable you are. Reed, I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know. Bryn was quiet for a long moment, her hands still in the dishwater. Then she said, I love you too. I hate that I do. I hate that loving you means being vulnerable again. But I can't deny it anymore. Reed's breath caught. I love you, Bryn repeated, and I'm terrified of what that means. It means we try, together, no more secrets, no more manipulation, just us, figuring it out. Bryn turned to face him, suds dripping from her hands. I'm not ready to get married again. I know. I might not be ready for a long time. I'll wait. And if I'm never ready, then I'll love you anyway. Marriage doesn't make a family. We're already a family. A piece of paper doesn't change that. Bryn's eyes filled with tears. How did you get so wise? I destroyed everything good in my life and spent months learning from that mistake. She laughed through her tears, and Reed wiped them away gently. Can I kiss you? He asked. Bryn's answer was to close the distance between them. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like their first kiss years ago. This wasn't the passionate beginning of young love. This was the careful rebuilding of something broken, handled with tenderness and care. When they pulled apart, Bryn rested her forehead against his. One day at a time, she whispered. One day at a time, Reed agreed. From the living room, Ruby's voice called out, Mama, Dada, come play. They pulled apart, laughing, and went to play with their daughters. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Reed didn't go back to his apartment. He stayed, sleeping on the couch again, but this time by invitation rather than crisis. And in the morning, when the twins woke up and found both parents there, Ruby announced, Family together, as if she'd been waiting for this all along. Maybe she had been. The twins' second birthday approached, and Bryn wanted to celebrate properly this time. Last year had been quiet, just her and the girls and Dorothy, because Reed hadn't known they existed yet. This year would be different. She planned a party at a local park, invited other families from the building, asked Dorothy to help with decorations, let Reed handle the cake. The morning of the party, Bryn stood in front of her mirror getting ready and barely recognized herself. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost during those desperate months. Her eyes were clear. Her smile came easily. She looked like someone who was living instead of just surviving. Reed knocked on the door, entering with the cake box. You look beautiful. It's just a sundress. You're beautiful anyway. The party was chaos in the best way. Toddlers running everywhere. Parents trying to keep up. The twins opening presents with more interest in the wrapping paper than the gifts. Hazel and Ruby blew out their candles together, both sets of tiny lungs working hard to extinguish two tiny flames. Everyone sang. Photos were taken. Reed stood beside Bryn, watching their daughters, and felt gratitude so intense it was almost painful. 2 years ago, he hadn't known they existed. 1 year ago, Bryn wouldn't let him near them. Now he was at their birthday party, part of their lives, building something that looked like a future. Thank you, he said to Bryn. For what? For letting me be here, for giving me this chance. They deserved a father. You're trying to be a good one. Am I succeeding? Bryn looked at him, really looked, and smiled. Yeah, you're succeeding. The party wound down. Kids went home. The park emptied. Reed, Bryn, and the twins walked home together, the girls in their stroller, exhausted from excitement. They put the girls to bed together, both twins fighting sleep because they didn't want the day to end. Finally, after 3 stories and 2 lullabies, they were out. Reed and Bryn stood over the cribs, watching them sleep. Best day, Ruby murmured, half asleep. Bryn's hand found Reed's. Yeah, baby girl, she whispered. Best day. That night, Reed didn't go back to his apartment. And the next night, and the next, without discussion, without formal decision, he just stopped leaving. His things migrated upstairs gradually. A toothbrush, clothes, his laptop, until one day, 2 weeks after the birthday party, Bryn looked around and realized Reed lived there. Is this okay? Reed asked, noticing her noticing. Yeah, I think it is. If it's too much, I can still... It's not too much. Bryn searched for the word. It's right. It feels right. Reed pulled her close, and Bryn let herself be held. They were building something. Slowly, carefully, but building nonetheless. We've come so far in Reed and Bryn's journey, from a broken door and broken trust to slowly rebuilt family. But what happens next will test everything they've built. If you're invested in this story, if you want to see how it ends, I need you to engage. Hit that like button if you believe broken things can be made whole. And comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had to learn to trust someone again. Or just say, I'm with you, Dr. Phillips. Because what comes next, the crisis that forces ultimate trust, you won't want to miss it. Let's continue. The call came at 2:37 in the morning. Reed was asleep beside Bryn. something that still felt new and precious when her phone blazed to life. It was Dorothy. "Bryn, something's wrong with Ruby. She's burning up and she's not responding right." Bryn was out of bed before she finished processing the words. Reed was right behind her. They ran the 2 floors to Dorothy's apartment where she'd been watching the girls for the evening. The older woman met them at the door, her face pale. "I put them to bed at 8. They were fine. I checked on them at 10, both sleeping peacefully. But I heard Ruby crying around 2. When I went in, she was..." Dorothy's voice shook. "She was seizing Bryn. Her whole body. I called 911. Bryn pushed past into the apartment. Ruby was on the couch now, the seizure over, but she was limp and burning with fever. "Baby girl," Bryn's voice cracked. "Mama's here." Ruby's eyes opened, unfocused and glassy. "Mama, hot. I know, baby. We're going to make you feel better." The ambulance arrived minutes later. Paramedics took vitals, asked questions, loaded Ruby onto a tiny stretcher that looked impossibly big for such a small child. Bryn climbed into the ambulance with Ruby. Reed followed in his car with Hazel, who'd woken up and was crying for her sister. The hospital was too bright, too loud, too full of people having their own crises. Ruby was rushed back immediately. Bryn tried to follow, but a nurse stopped her. "We need to get her stabilized first. Someone will come get you as soon as we can." "That's my daughter. I understand. But right now, the best thing you can do for her is let us work." Bryn stood in the waiting room shaking, while Reed appeared with Hazel. The little girl reached for her mother. "Mama, where Ruby?" "Ruby's with the doctors, sweetheart. They're helping her feel better." "Want Ruby?" "I know." "Me too." They sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs. Hazel in Bryn's lap. Reed beside them, his hand on Bryn's back. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a doctor emerged. "Ruby's stable. The fever broke. We believe it was a febrile seizure, scary but not uncommon in children this age. We're keeping her overnight for observation, but she should be fine." Bryn's entire body sagged with relief. "Can I see her?" "Of course." Ruby looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. IVs in her tiny arm, monitors beeping steadily. But her eyes were open, and when she saw her family, she smiled. "Mama, Dada, Hazel." Hazel squirmed out of Bryn's arms and climbed onto the hospital bed, careful of the wires, and curled up next to her sister. "Ruby sick?" "Ruby sick," her twin confirmed, "but better now." The girls held hands, and Bryn had to look away before she started crying. "They're so connected," the nurse said softly. "Twins often are. They're everything," Bryn whispered. The hospital let them all stay, bending rules about visitors because separating the twins seemed cruel. Reed held Hazel, while Bryn stayed close to Ruby. They rotated through the night, dozing in uncomfortable chairs, watching monitors, responding when either girl needed something. Around 4 in the morning, Ruby finally fell into real sleep. Hazel was out too, sprawled across Reed's chest. Bryn looked at Reed in the dim hospital room. "Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? 18 months ago, you would have been across the country at a conference, not knowing I needed you. 18 months ago, I was an idiot." "Yeah, you were." Bryn's smile was soft. "But you're not anymore. I'm trying not to be." When I saw her seizing, Bryn's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "When I thought I might lose her, you know what my first thought was?" "What?" "I'm glad Reed exists. I'm glad I don't have to do this alone." Reed's eyes filled. "That terrifies me," Bryn continued. "Being glad you exist, needing you, depending on you. Because what if—" "I won't leave." Reed's voice was firm. "I won't abandon you. I won't choose anything over you and the girls. Not my company, not my pride, nothing." "How can you be sure?" "Because I've lived without you, and it was hell. Everything I built, everything I achieved, it meant nothing without you to share it with. So I'm sure because I know what the alternative feels like, and I never want to feel that way again." Bryn reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. "I love you," she said. "I'm still scared. I'm still healing. But I love you. And I think, maybe, I'm starting to trust you again." Reed brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "That's enough. That's more than I deserve." They sat in the hospital room, holding hands while their daughters slept, and something settled into place. Not perfect healing, not complete trust, but progress. Real, measurable progress. By morning, Ruby was back to her normal, energetic self, demanding breakfast and asking when she could go home. The doctors did final checks, confirmed it had been a febrile seizure, gave instructions about fever management, and discharged them. Going home felt like a victory. The apartment had never looked so good. They put both girls down for a nap, exhausted from their hospital adventure. And then Bryn and Reed collapsed on the couch. "I need to tell you something," Bryn said. Reed tensed slightly. "Okay. Last night, when I was terrified, when I thought we might lose Ruby, I realized something." "What?" "I don't want to keep living like we're temporary. I don't want to keep holding back because I'm afraid of getting hurt." "Bryn, let me finish." Bryn sat up, turning to face him. "I've been protecting myself, keeping walls up, making sure I had an exit strategy in case you turned back into the man who left me. But that's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me, and it's definitely not fair to the girls. Where is this going? I want us to be a real family. Not co-parents who happen to live together, not exes who are figuring things out. I want us to be together, actually together. Are you sure?" "No." Bryn laughed. "I'm not sure about anything, but I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions." Reed cupped her face in his hands. "I love you. I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you can trust me. I know, and I'm going to let you. I'm going to stop waiting for you to fail and start believing you can succeed." They kissed, and it felt like a beginning, not a return to what they'd been before, but the start of something new, built on honesty and hard-won trust. The next morning, Reed made a decision. He asked Bryn to take a walk with him. Dorothy agreed to watch the girls. They walked to the courthouse where they'd gotten married 4 years ago, stood on the steps where they'd taken a selfie because they couldn't afford a photographer. "This is where we started," Reed said. "Yeah, I'm not asking you to marry me again. Not yet. I want you to have time to be sure, but I needed to bring you here because I want you to know something." "What?" "The man who stood here 4 years ago, he loved you with everything he had, but he was weak. He was insecure. He let other people's voices matter more than yours. Reed, that man doesn't exist anymore. He died the day I saw you feeding our daughters in that broken apartment. And the man standing here now, he loves you more. He loves you with full knowledge of what love actually costs, and he will never, ever let anyone come between us again." Bryn's eyes filled with tears. "So I'm not asking you to marry me today. I'm just promising you that when I do ask, it will be because we're both ready. Because you trust me completely. Because there's no fear left, only certainty. What if that day never comes? Then I'll love you anyway, for as long as you'll let me." Bryn looked up at the courthouse, then back at Reed. "Ask me." "What?" "Ask me now." "Bryn, you just said you weren't ready." "I wasn't ready yesterday, but standing here, hearing you say those things, I realize I am ready. I'm ready to stop punishing us both for what happened. I'm ready to choose love over fear. So ask me." Reed's hands were shaking as he took both of hers. "Bryn Sullivan, will you marry me? Will you let me spend my life loving you and our daughters? Will you build a future with me, knowing it won't be perfect, but it will be honest?" "Yes." The word was simple, certain, final. "Yes," Bryn repeated. "I'll marry you. Again. For real this time." Reed pulled a ring from his pocket. Not the ring from their first marriage, that was lost to the past. This was new, simple, a sapphire the color of her eyes surrounded by small diamonds. "I bought this 6 weeks ago," he admitted. "I've been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. This is the right moment." He slid it onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They got married 3 days later. Not a big wedding, not a production. Just them, the twins, Dorothy, and a justice of the peace at the same courthouse. Bryn wore a simple white dress. Reed wore a suit. Hazel and Ruby wore matching flower girl dresses and didn't understand what was happening but knew it was important. The vows were different this time. Reed spoke first. "Bryn, I'm not promising you perfection. I'm promising you presence. I'm promising that even when things are hard, I'll stay. Even when I'm scared, I'll choose you. Even when it would be easier to run, I'll stand and fight for us. I'm promising you honesty, vulnerability, and love that grows stronger every day." Bryn's voice shook as she replied. "Reed, I'm not promising you that I'll never be afraid. I'm promising that I won't let fear control me. I'm not promising that I won't remember the pain. I'm promising that I won't let pain define our future. I'm promising you partnership, trust rebuilt one day at a time, and love that survived the impossible." The justice of the peace pronounced them married. Reed kissed his wife, and the twins cheered, not understanding but happy because their parents were happy. They took photos on the courthouse steps, the same spot as 4 years ago, but everything was different. They were different, older, scarred, wiser, but together. That evening, they had a small celebration dinner at the apartment. Dorothy brought a cake. The twins made a mess. Everyone laughed. It was perfect in its imperfection. After the girls were in bed, after Dorothy had gone home, Reed and Bryn stood on their small balcony, looking out at Seattle. "No regrets?" Reed asked. "About marrying you?" "No." "About what we went through to get here?" "Too many to count. But I don't regret where we ended up." Reed pulled her close. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I know. That's why I chose you." They stood there, two people who'd been destroyed and rebuilt, holding each other as the city moved around them. Life didn't suddenly become easy. There were still hard days. Days when Bryn remembered the pain and pulled away slightly. Days when Reed's insecurities flared and he worried he'd mess everything up again. But they worked through it. They went to couples therapy, something Reed suggested and Bryn appreciated. They learned to communicate better, to voice fears before they became resentments, to choose vulnerability over self-protection. They learned that healing wasn't linear, and that was okay. The twins grew, started preschool, made friends, developed their own personalities more fully. Ruby remained fearless. Hazel remained thoughtful. Both were brilliant, curious, and absolutely certain that they had the best parents in the world. Bryn finished her degree, graduated with honors, started a job at a tech startup that valued her skills. Reed restructured Hawthorne Technologies, made it more ethical, more focused on positive impact, built the company into something he was actually proud of. They moved to a house with a yard, gave the girls a dog, built a life that looked nothing like what either of them had imagined at 20, but was better than anything they could have planned. 1 year after their second wedding, Bryn came home from work to find the house decorated with flowers. "What is this?" "Anniversary," Reed said. "1 year since you said yes." Again, you remembered. How could I forget the day I got my life back? Bryn set down her bag and walked into his arms. "Best decision I ever made." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They had dinner as a family, put the girls to bed, and then sat together on the couch the same way they had in that tiny apartment, but everything different. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing all of this?" Bryn asked. "Every day. Does it scare you?" "Terrifies me, which is why I never take it for granted." Bryn leaned her head on his shoulder. "I forgive you," she said quietly. Reed went still. "What?" "For leaving, for believing Constance, for all of it. I forgive you. I don't know when it happened. It wasn't a single moment. It was gradual. But somewhere along the way, I stopped carrying the anger. I stopped needing you to pay for what happened. I just let it go." Reed's eyes filled with tears. "You don't owe me forgiveness. I know. That's why I can give it." Bryn sat up, looking at him. "For a long time I thought forgiving you meant saying what you did was okay. But I've learned it doesn't mean that. It means I'm not going to let what you did keep hurting me. It means I'm choosing peace over pain." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This is for me as much as for you." Carrying that anger around was exhausting. Letting it go feels like freedom. They kissed, soft and slow, and it felt like the final piece of healing clicking into place. Not because the past was erased. It wasn't. The scars were still there, but scars were just proof of survival. And they'd survived, more than survived. They'd thrived. 2 years later, Bryn was pregnant again. It wasn't planned, but it was wanted. This time, Reed was there for every appointment, every ultrasound, every moment. He held her hand through morning sickness, brought her weird food cravings at midnight, talked to her growing belly about meeting their new brother, a boy. They were having a son. Hazel and Ruby were thrilled, already planning what they'd teach him. And when Bryn went into labor, Reed was right beside her, counting contractions, breathing with her, supporting her. Their son was born on a Tuesday morning, healthy and perfect and screaming with impressive lung power. They named him Thomas, after Reed's father, with the middle name Sullivan, honoring Bryn's family. Reed cut the cord with shaking hands and cried when the nurse placed his son in his arms. 3, he said to Bryn. We have 3 perfect children. We do. Bryn smiled, exhausted and radiant. We really do. The girls met their brother the next day. Ruby climbed onto the hospital bed immediately, fascinated. Hazel was more cautious, but eventually reached out to touch his tiny hand. He's so small, Hazel whispered. You were this small once, Bryn said. Really? Really? Ruby looked at Reed. We keep him? Yeah, baby girl. We keep him. Good. Bringing Thomas home felt different from bringing the twins home. This time, there was no fear, no uncertainty, no wondering if they'd survive. Just joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Reed was an experienced father now. He knew how to change diapers in the dark, how to function on 2 hours of sleep, how to soothe a crying baby. And Bryn wasn't alone this time. Every night feed, every diaper change, every exhausting moment, Reed was there. They were partners, in every sense of the word. Life was chaotic, beautiful, full. 5 years after Reed had broken down Bryn's door, they sat on their back porch, watching their children play. Hazel and Ruby were 7, chasing each other around the yard. Thomas was 2, toddling after his sisters with determination. Sometimes I can't believe this is our life, Bryn said. Good, can't believe, or bad, can't believe. Good, definitely good. Reed took her hand, the same way he'd done 1,000 times before. I'm proud of us. For fighting for this. For not giving up when it would have been easier. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, grateful for second chances and hard-won healing. The past wasn't forgotten. The pain they'd caused each other, the time they'd lost, the damage that had been done, it was all still part of their story. But it wasn't the whole story. The whole story included redemption, growth, forgiveness, love that survived the impossible. And as the sun set over their yard, painting everything in shades of gold, Reed and Bryn knew they'd done more than survive. They'd built something beautiful from the ruins, and that was worth everything. Let me pause here because we've reached the end of Reed and Bryn's journey. But before I leave you, I need to share what this story means. This is Dr. Phillips, and I've been honored to walk with you through this story of betrayal and redemption, of love that survived when it shouldn't have, of 2 people who refused to let their worst moments define them. Now I need something from you before you go. If this story touched you, if it made you think or feel or believe in second chances, I need you to do 3 things. First, smash that like button. Tell the algorithm that stories about real love, about redemption, about growth, these stories matter. They matter more than ever in a world that tells us to give up when things get hard. Second, subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips. Because every single week, I bring you stories that don't just entertain, they transform. Stories that remind us what it means to be human, to fail, to grow, to love despite the risk. Third, comment below and build this community with me. Tell me, have you ever given someone a second chance? Have you ever been the one needing redemption? Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and risking love? Where in the world are you watching from? What part of Reed and Bryn's story resonated most with you? Or simply tell me, I'm with you, Dr. Phillips. Because when you comment, when you engage, you're not just helping this channel grow. You're building a community of people who believe in growth, in grace, in the possibility of change. You're saying that love stories don't have to be perfect to be powerful. And please, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone struggling with trust. Someone hoping for a second chance. Someone who needs to know that broken doesn't mean beyond repair. Your share might be exactly what someone needs today.